Love, it turned out, wasn't like in the movies. It wasn't grand gestures or dramatic confessions. For Ethan and Lila, love was quieter, made of shared coffees, exchanged glances, and late-night talks that made the world disappear after that night under the streetlight. Something shifted between them. The next morning, everything felt both familiar and new. They still walked to class together, still teased each other the same way. But there was a softness now, a lingering touch. A look that said, "I see you, even in silence." Lila couldn't stop smiling that morning. She sat in her photography lecture, pretending to take notes. But her mind replayed the moment they had finally confessed their feelings. Ethan, on the other hand, tried to focus on his architecture assignment. But every line he drew seemed to curve into the shape of her smile. After classes, they met at the cafe, their cafe by the window, where it had all begun. Ethan had already ordered her favorite drink, the way she liked it. Extra cream, a hint of cinnamon. She took a sip and smiled. "You remember?" "I remember everything," he said softly. Their days started blending together in the best way. Study sessions turned into laughter. Walks turned into hand-holding. And nights were filled with quiet phone calls that lasted until one of them fell asleep mid-sentence. Sometimes they would sit on the campus rooftop, watching the city lights flicker below. Lila would rest her head on his shoulder while Ethan talked about his future projects, skyscrapers that would touch the clouds, bridges that would connect hearts. She loved listening to him dream. "You always sound so sure," she said one night. He smiled faintly. "That's because you make me feel like I can do anything." She looked at him then, eyes soft. "You already can, Ethan. You just don't see how amazing you are." Okay. And in moments like that, love didn't need to be said. It was there, glowing quietly between them. But real life, even in its sweetest chapters, always has its tests. As the semester went on, Ethan's workload increased. The architecture program was demanding long nights, group projects, tight deadlines. Lila understood, but she missed him. Sometimes he'd cancel their evening plans to stay at the studio. And though she said it was fine, she often walked home alone, scrolling through their photos to feel close to him. One night, after another canceled dinner, she sat in her room editing pictures from her last photo shoot. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan, still at the studio. "Don't wait up. I'll call you later," she typed back. "It's okay. Just don't forget to eat." But when she hit send, her chest felt heavier than she wanted to admit. The next day, she showed up at his studio with 2 cups of coffee and a box of donuts. He was hunched over his desk, surrounded by sketches and crumpled papers. His eyes were tired, but focused. "Thought you might need a break," she said gently. He looked up, surprised, then smiled in relief. "You're an angel." She sat beside him, passing him a donut. "You're working too hard," he laughed softly. "Says the girl who once stayed up 3 nights editing photos." "Touché," she admitted, "but still, you have to breathe sometimes." He looked at her then, really looked, and realized how much he had missed her. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You make everything better. You know that? Then don't forget me when you're building your fancy skyscrapers." She said playfully, but her eyes held a trace of sadness. "Never," he promised. "You're part of everything I build." Her heart melted, and she leaned her head on his shoulder. They stayed like that, surrounded by paper and dreams, while the city hummed quietly outside. But as weeks passed, distance between them began to stretch, not in feeling, but in time. Ethan's final project consumed most of his hours. Lila had her own commitments to a photography internship that demanded early mornings and long days. They still texted, still called, but sometimes it wasn't enough. There were days when they barely saw each other, and though neither said it aloud, both felt the ache. One evening, after a long day, Lila sat at her favorite cafe, waiting for him. The clock ticked past the hour they'd planned to meet. Her coffee grew cold. She checked her phone. No message. She sighed, disappointed but not angry. Just as she was about to leave, Ethan rushed in, breathless. "I'm so sorry, Lila. The model broke. I had to fix it before tomorrow's review." She smiled weakly. "It's okay. I figured something came up. Should have called," he said, guilt in his voice. "Yeah, you should have," she replied softly. There was silence, the first uncomfortable one between them. Then Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't want you to think I'm forgetting us." Her eyes softened. "I know you're not. I just miss you," exhaled, squeezing her hand. "I miss you too. I promise, when this project's over, I'll make it up to you." She smiled again, trying to believe him. "You'd better." And when he smiled back, she knew he meant it. A week later, he kept his promise. The project was done, and he surprised her with a quiet evening at the riverbank, their place. He brought her favorite pastries, her favorite coffee, and a small photo frame. Inside was a sketch, a building design inspired by her. "It's called Lumen," he said. "It means light, because that's what you are to me." Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him. "You remembered everything." "Of course I did," he whispered. They sat together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "I think," she said softly, "this is my favorite place in the world, because of the view." He teased, "Because of you." The next few weeks were blissful, simple, content, full of warmth. They didn't need grand plans. Just being together was enough. Sometimes they cooked dinner in her apartment and laughed when they burned the food. Sometimes they stayed up talking about everything and nothing. Lila often photographed those little moments, his hands covered in paint from his models, his sleepy smile in the morning, the way he looked at her when she wasn't watching. And Ethan, though he rarely said it, was always sketching little pieces of their life together. They were young, in love, and learning how to balance it all: dreams, ambitions, and each other. There were moments of frustration, sure, but love always found a way to bring them back. One night, as they lay on the rooftop again, Lila looked up at the stars and whispered, "Do you think it's possible for something to stay this perfect forever?" Ethan turned to her, brushing his fingers over her hand. "Maybe not perfect," he said softly, "but real, yes. And real is better." She smiled, letting his words sink into her heart. Because maybe love wasn't about keeping things perfect. Maybe it was about finding someone who stayed, even when things weren't. And as the stars shimmered above them, they knew this was real. Time didn't stop for anyone, not even for love. The second year of university brought new challenges for both Ethan and Lila. What used to be simple morning coffees, late night talks, shared sunsets became rare luxuries. Between internships, projects, and growing responsibilities, their once effortless days started slipping away like sand through their fingers. Ethan had secured an internship at one of the city's top architecture firms, an opportunity he had dreamed of since his first day on campus. It was intense, competitive, and consuming. He loved every part of it, but it left him exhausted. Most nights, he came home long after midnight, covered in graphite and half asleep on his feet. Lila, meanwhile, had been accepted into a prestigious photography program, one that demanded travel, exhibits, and constant creativity. She started waking before sunrise to catch the best light, editing her work late into the night. They still loved each other deeply. That never changed. But love now required effort. Some days, when they finally managed to meet, it felt like trying to breathe again after being underwater too long. They would sit together in their cafe, holding hands across the table, catching up on lost time. "You look tired," Lila said one evening, tracing a finger over his wrist. "So do you," Ethan replied, smiling faintly. "Guess we're both chasing big dreams, huh?" She nodded. "Yeah, but sometimes I just want to stop chasing for a while. Just exist with you." He squeezed her hand. We will. Soon. Promise. Promise. They smiled at each other, but both knew life didn't always wait for promises. One Friday night, Lila called him after her exhibit. Her voice was soft but heavy. You couldn't come. Ethan sat in the office, blueprints spread out before him, his voice cracked with guilt. I tried, Lila. I really did. Then asked me to stay late again. I know, she interrupted, trying not to sound disappointed. It's just, I looked for you. Every time someone walked in, I thought it might be you. Silence hung between them. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know you are, she said quietly. I just miss you, Ethan. He closed his eyes, resting his forehead against the table. I miss you too. After that night, they both realized something. Love wasn't disappearing. It was just changing shape. It was learning to exist in the gaps between moments, in the texts sent at midnight, in the calls made half asleep, in the quiet belief that they were still each other's home, even when they couldn't always be together. Months passed, seasons changed, and slowly they adjusted. Lila started visiting him at his office during breaks, leaving little Polaroid photos on his desk, a cup of coffee, a sunrise, a self-portrait with a note that read, Tall, forget to look up sometimes. Ethan started leaving notes in her bag, sketches of her, drawings of little things she loved. It wasn't grand. Quote, it was love, real and steady. One Sunday, after weeks of barely seeing each other, Ethan showed up at her apartment with takeout boxes and tired eyes. Lila opened the door and stared at him. Surprise? I have the night off, said simply. Without a word, she threw her arms around him. They spent the night on the couch, eating noodles and watching old movies, laughing until they cried. It wasn't fancy or planned. It was everything they needed. As the credits rolled, Lila leaned against his chest. Do you ever wonder if love is supposed to be easy? He thought for a moment. Maybe it's not supposed to be easy, he said softly. Maybe it's supposed to be worth it. She smiled, half asleep. Then it's definitely worth it. He kissed her forehead, whispering, always. The following months brought new turning points. Ethan's internship turned into a full-time offer after graduation. Lila's photography was gaining recognition. Her work was featured in a city magazine. Her professor hinted at an opportunity abroad. One night, she showed him the email. They want me to go to Paris, she said, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. His heart lifted and sank at the same time. Paris, he repeated. That's amazing, Lila. She looked at him. It's only 6 months, but I don't want to go if it means losing us. He held her hand tightly. You're not losing me. You're finding yourself, okay? And I'll be right here when you come back. Tears filled her eyes. You mean that? He nodded. Of course I do. We promised to never hold each other back. Remember? She smiled through her tears. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Ethan Miller. And you're the best thing that ever will, he whispered. The day she left for Paris, they met at the airport. The city outside was gray and rainy, but inside, everything felt warm and alive. Lila hugged him tightly, her voice muffled against his shoulder. 6 months, she said. Don't forget me. He laughed softly, though his chest ached. Impossible, Kay. As she pulled away, she reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. Don't open this until you really miss me. He nodded, holding it like it was fragile. Deal. She kissed him once, slow and full of everything words couldn't say, and then she was gone. When she disappeared past security, Ethan stood there for a long time, staring at the empty hallway. He felt both proud and hollow, proud of her courage, hollow from the silence she left behind. That night, he sat in his apartment, surrounded by her photos, her laughter echoing in his mind. Finally, he opened the envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was of the two of them sitting by the riverbank, the same spot where she had confessed her feelings. On the back, in her handwriting, it said, Don't let the distance scare you. Love doesn't fade. It waits. He smiled, tears stinging his eyes. And so he waited for 6 months. They lived in different worlds, but shared the same heartbeat. Their calls were filled with laughter, longing, and dreams of what they'd do when she came back. Ethan worked harder than ever, building not just buildings, but a future, one that had her in it. And Lila crossed the ocean, took photos that made people stop and feel something. But no matter how beautiful Paris was, every sunset reminded her of him. When she returned, she didn't tell him in advance. She just showed up at the cafe, camera around her neck, and found him sitting by the window. Same place, same cup of coffee, same quiet smile. He looked up, stunned. For a second, he didn't believe his eyes. Then he stood, almost knocking his chair over. "You're back," he breathed. "I told you, love waits," she whispered. He ran to her, wrapping her in his arms, and the world outside disappeared. For a moment, everything was just like before, only better, because they had survived the distance, the doubts, and the time apart. And in that embrace, under the city's golden morning light, they knew real love doesn't fade. It grows, even when you're miles apart.